The alarm bell screamed through the exploration vessel as Navigator Cal frantically checked her readings for the third time in 10 minutes. Her forearms moved across the control panels with practiced speed while her compound eyes tracked multiple data streams simultaneously. The Vorthan ship's Silent Wind had been drifting through the dead zone between spiral arms for 3 rotations now, and this was the first time anything had appeared on their sensors. Science Officer Reed looked up from his station with confusion written across his scaled features. His people, the Draconians, were known for their calm nature, but even he seemed shaken by what the instruments were telling them. The quantum signatures they were detecting should not exist in this empty region of space where even the most desperate pirates refused to venture. Something massive hung in the void ahead of them, wrapped in a shimmering field of blue-white energy that bent light around its edges like a cosmic mirage. The object was clearly artificial, but its design matched nothing in any known database. Long angular hull sections stretched for what appeared to be several kilometers, while weapon emplacements dotted its surface in patterns that suggested a military vessel of enormous proportions. The translation matrix in their computer system worked overtime trying to decipher the markings along the hull. The symbols were crude compared to modern galactic standard, but they carried an aggressive quality that made everyone on the bridge uncomfortable. When the computer finally processed the alien writing, the bridge crew fell silent as the results appeared on their screens. Human. The massive warship suspended in quantum stasis was human. Fleet. Admiral Drex received the encrypted transmission from the Silent Wind while reviewing routine patrol reports in his private quarters aboard the Council Defense Force flagship. The message was so unbelievable that he read it 4 times before accepting that his eyes were not deceiving him. Within hours, emergency protocols that had not been activated over 2 millennia began flooding military networks across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had been built on the ashes of the human empire. Every species that held membership in the Alliance remembered the stories passed down through generations about the brief but terrifying period when humanity had swept across the stars, like a plague of efficient death. Their warships had been mobile fortresses capable of breaking siege lines and destroying entire fleets. Single-handedly, humans had not been evil in the traditional sense, but they had approached warfare with a cold efficiency that bordered on the mechanical. They calculated acceptable losses with the same detachment that others might use to plan a meal. Their tactics were unpredictable, and their willingness to sacrifice themselves in battle was legendary among military historians, who still studied their campaigns. The human civil war had lasted only 3 years, but it had been so devastating that it wiped out their entire civilization. Planets were glassed from orbit and space stations were cracked open like eggs. When the fighting finally ended, there were no winners left alive to claim victory. Earth itself had become a radioactive wasteland that remained quarantined to this day. Now, Admiral Drex found himself staring at reports that suggested at least 1 human warship had survived. The vessel appeared to be a Retribution-class dreadnought, according to the classification systems in the military archives. These ships had been the pinnacle of human military engineering, and each one had been capable of taking on entire fleets. 12 ships from various Council member species converged on the coordinates within days. The fleet maintained what they hoped was a safe distance of 10,000 kilometers from the mysterious human vessel, while their sensors tried to penetrate the quantum field surrounding it. What they found inside made the situation even more disturbing. Life signs were detected throughout the ship. Somehow, the crew was still alive after 2,000 years of drifting in quantum stasis. Movement could be tracked through the corridors and command centers, as if the humans were simply going about their daily routines while trapped in their temporal bubble. The quantum field itself defied explanation. The energy readings suggested technology far beyond anything currently available to Council scientists. The field bent space and time around the ship, creating a pocket of altered reality where the normal rules of physics seemed to be more like gentle suggestions. Admiral Drex studied the tactical displays with growing unease. His own flagship was A modern vessel equipped with the latest weapons and defensive systems, but it would be like a child's toy compared to the human dreadnought. The historical records were very clear about what Retribution-class ships could do in battle. The Battle of Kepler Station had seen a single human dreadnought destroy 47 enemy vessels before running out of ammunition. Every officer on every ship in the fleet knew those same historical accounts. The humans had never lost a naval engagement during their expansion period. Their ships had been designed with one purpose in mind, which was to seek out enemy vessels and destroy them with overwhelming firepower. The fact that this particular ship had survived their species' extinction suggested it might be one of their most advanced vessels. The quantum field pulsed with an ominous rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Sensor technicians reported that the field was slowly destabilizing, as if the alien scanning attempts were somehow accelerating its breakdown. Computer models suggested that the field would collapse completely within a matter of hours rather than the centuries it might have taken naturally. When that happened, the human warship would be free to resume normal operations. 300 humans who had been locked in temporal suspension would suddenly find themselves in a galaxy where their species was extinct, and they were surrounded by the descendants of the civilizations they had once conquered. Admiral Drex made preparations for what might be the most important first contact situation in galactic history. Emergency channels were open to Council headquarters while military analysts tried to develop strategies for dealing with a situation that had no precedent. How do you negotiate with the ghosts of a dead empire when those ghosts happen to be piloting one of the most dangerous weapons ever constructed? The quantum field continued to pulse and weaken while 12 nervous fleets maintained their vigil around humanity's final legacy. Soon the last human warship would wake up, and the galaxy would discover whether the legends about human military prowess had been exaggerated by fearful historians or if they were about to face something truly terrifying. Emergency lights cast long shadows across the corridors of the human warship. Retribution as Chief Engineer Riley ran diagnostics on systems that had been frozen in time for over 2 millennia. Her boots echoed against metal deck plates while she moved between control panels, checking the status of weapons arrays and defensive shields that remained as deadly as the day they were first installed. The quantum field that had protected them during the Battle of Terra Prime was finally breaking down. What had started as humanity's salvation during their final war was now becoming their gateway back into normal space-time. Riley could feel the ship vibrating through the deck plates as massive systems came online after centuries of temporal suspension. Commander Alex Kane reviewed tactical reports in his ready room while trying to understand exactly what they were facing. The external sensors showed 12 alien vessels maintaining formation around their ship, but their intentions remained unclear. These were not human designs, and his databases contained no information about their technology or capabilities. His communication officer, Lieutenant Blake, worked frantically to decode the alien transmissions they were intercepting. The languages were completely unknown, but the computer was slowly building translation matrices based on mathematical principles and universal constants. What they were learning suggested that these aliens knew exactly what they were dealing with. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency as they prepared for whatever was waiting outside their quantum cocoon. Weapons Officer Davis ran through targeting sequences while Navigator Wells plotted potential escape routes. Every person aboard the Retribution had survived humanity's darkest hour, and they were not about to surrender now. Kane walked onto the bridge just as the quantum field stability dropped below 50%. Through the main view screen he could see the alien ships more clearly now. Their design suggested different species working together in some kind of alliance. The largest vessel appeared to be a command ship, while the others formed a protective formation around it. The computer finally managed to partially decode some of the alien communications. What they heard made the bridge crew exchange worried glances. The aliens were accessing historical databases and discussing something called Code Crimson. References to human warships and military capabilities filled their transmissions, along with what sounded like fear. Riley reported from engineering that all weapon systems were fully operational. The quantum stasis had preserved everything perfectly, including their most advanced armaments. The Retribution carried enough firepower to level entire cities, and their defensive systems could withstand bombardment from entire fleets. By human military standards, they were virtually indestructible. The alien vessels began transmitting surrender codes before the quantum field had even completely collapsed. Blake stared at his communications panel in disbelief as formal surrender messages arrived from all 12 ships simultaneously. Their formation changed from aggressive to defensive as they powered down their weapons. Systems. Kane could hardly believe what he was seeing. The alien fleet outnumbered them 12-1, but they were surrendering without even attempting to fight. The tactical analysis suggested that these were modern military vessels with advanced technology. Yet they seemed terrified of a single human ship. The quantum field finally collapsed in a brilliant flash of blue-white light that briefly illuminated the surrounding alien vessels. Normal space-time reasserted itself around the Retribution, and for the first time in over 2,000 years, a human warship was free to maneuver in open space. All systems showed green across the board as the ship's massive fusion reactors came online at full power. The artificial gravity stabilized and life support systems resumed normal operations throughout the vessel. 300 human beings who had been locked in temporal suspension suddenly found themselves back in the normal flow of time. The alien flagship transmitted a formal request for communication. When the channel opened, Kane found himself looking at a being unlike anything in human records. Admiral Drex appeared to be some kind of evolved reptilian with intelligence gleaming in his large eyes. His expression showed respect mixed with what could only be described as terror. The alien admiral spoke in accented but understandable human standard. His translation systems had apparently been working on their language since detecting the ship. He formally surrendered his entire fleet and requested terms for cessation of hostilities. The formality of his speech suggested military protocols that transcended species barriers. Kane realized that these aliens were not responding to the Retribution as just another warship. They were treating it as something far more dangerous. The historical records they had been accessing must have contained detailed information about human military capabilities. These beings remembered humanity even though his species had been extinct for 2 millennia. The weight of that realization settled over the bridge crew like a heavy blanket. They were not just the survivors of a lost battle, but the final remnant of an entire civilization. Every other human who had ever lived was dead, and they were surrounded by aliens who remembered their species only through legends of war and destruction. Kane accepted the alien surrender, but made it clear that they had no hostile intentions, unless threatened. The Retribution was powerful enough to destroy every ship in the alien fleet, but that was not why they had survived humanity's extinction. They had endured to represent something better than the endless cycle of war that had destroyed their homeworld. The alien admiral seemed relieved by Kane's response. His fear gradually gave way to curiosity as he realized that these humans were not the mythical destroyers from his people's histories. They were simply the survivors of a dead civilization trying to understand what had happened to their galaxy. While they were locked away in quantum stasis, communication channels opened between the human ship and the alien fleet as both sides began the delicate process of first contact. The Retribution remained at full combat readiness, but its weapons stayed powered down. For the first time since their emergence from temporal suspension, the crew began to hope that they might find allies rather than enemies among the stars. Deep in the archives of the Galactic Council headquarters, automated systems that had not been accessed for centuries suddenly came online as emergency protocols activated across military networks. Ancient databases containing the collected knowledge of dozens of civilizations began searching for information about humanity, while Code Crimson directives flooded communication channels throughout known space. The protocols had been established after the human wars when the galaxy was still recovering from the brief but devastating period of human expansion. Every major species had contributed to the archives, ensuring that future generations would remember the lessons learned during those dark years. Now, those same systems were warning of a threat that should have been extinct. Admiral Drex stood in his command center watching as historical files downloaded to his tactical systems. The information painted a picture of humanity that was both fascinating and terrifying. Humans had not been the largest or strongest species in the galaxy, but they had possessed something that set them apart from every other civilization. They had been natural-born warriors who treated warfare as both art and science, human military. Doctrine was still taught in council academies as an example of tactical brilliance combined with strategic ruthlessness. Their ships had been designed with one purpose, which was to find enemy vessels and destroy them with overwhelming firepower. The Retribution-class dreadnoughts represented the pinnacle of human military engineering, with each vessel capable of taking on entire fleets. The Battle of Kepler Station remained the most studied naval engagement in galactic history. A single human dreadnought had faced down a fleet of 47 enemy warships and emerged victorious. The human commander had used advanced tactics and superior firepower to systematically destroy each enemy vessel while minimizing damage to his own ship. The engagement had lasted 6 hours and ended with complete human victory. Similar battles had occurred throughout human space as their military expanded across hundreds of star systems. No alien fleet had ever successfully defeated a human naval force in open combat. Their tactics were unpredictable and their technology was specifically designed for space warfare. Most importantly, their crews never surrendered and often chose death over capture. The human civil war had been different from their external conflicts. When humans fought other species, they used calculated aggression and strategic planning. When they fought each other, they used total warfare that consumed entire star systems. The final battle over Earth had involved weapons that cracked continents and poisoned atmospheres with radioactive fallout. Admiral Drex reviewed tactical projections as his computer analyzed the potential threat posed by the Retribution. The numbers were clear and terrifying. His fleet of 12 modern warships would last approximately 4 minutes against a single human dreadnought operating at full capacity. The human vessel carried enough firepower to destroy space stations, and its defensive systems could withstand bombardment from dozens of ships. The quantum field surrounding the human ship was now showing critical instability. Sensor readings indicated that complete collapse was imminent, and when that happened, the Retribution would be free to maneuver and fight. 300 humans who had been locked in temporal suspension would suddenly find themselves in a galaxy where their species was extinct. Those humans would be confused and probably frightened by their situation. They would see 12 alien warships surrounding their vessel and might interpret that as a hostile act. Human military protocols called for immediate offensive action when faced with superior numbers. The first response of human commanders was typically to attack before the enemy could coordinate their forces. Drex made the decision that would define first contact with humanity's survivors. He ordered all ships in his fleet to power down their weapons and transmit universal surrender codes. The decision was not based on cowardice but on tactical reality. Fighting a human dreadnought was not warfare, it was suicide with extra steps. His fellow commanders protested the surrender order. Captain Roth from the destroyer Starpiercer pointed out that they outnumbered the human ship 12-1. Other officers echoed similar sentiments, believing that their numerical advantage would be sufficient to overcome any single enemy vessel, regardless of its capabilities. Admiral Drex had to explain the historical context that his junior officers were apparently missing. The Retribution was not just any warship, but a legend from the age of human expansion. The vessel they were facing had probably participated in battles that destroyed entire civilizations. Its crew consisted of humans who had survived their species' extinction, which meant they were likely among the most experienced warriors in galactic history. The quantum field collapsed in a brilliant display of energy that briefly illuminated the surrounding space. When the light faded, the human dreadnought hung motionless in normal space-time with all of its weapon systems coming online. The ship was massive and angular with aggressive lines that suggested violence even When it was not moving, sensor readings confirmed that the human vessel was operating at full capacity. Its power signatures were enormous, and its weapon systems showed ready status across all firing solutions. The ship could engage every vessel in the alien fleet simultaneously while maintaining defensive screens, capable of absorbing tremendous amounts of damage. Commander Kane appeared on the communication channel looking exactly like the humans from historical records. His species had changed very little during their brief time in the galaxy, but their impact on galactic civilization had been profound. Every military academy still studied human tactics, and every warship design incorporated lessons learned from fighting against human vessels. The human commander accepted their surrender with professional courtesy that suggested military training and discipline. He made it clear that his ship had no hostile intentions unless threatened, but also demonstrated that he was prepared for combat if necessary. The Retribution remained at full combat readiness while maintaining non-aggressive positioning. Admiral Drex felt relief wash over him as the immediate crisis passed. The legendary human dreadnought was real and operational, but its crew seemed willing to talk rather than fight. Perhaps the survivors of humanity's extinction would choose cooperation over the warfare that had defined their species in the past. The galaxy had changed considerably during the 2 millennia since human extinction. The Galactic Council represented cooperation between species rather than conquest and domination. Perhaps these last humans could find a place in the new order that had grown from the ashes of their empire. Silence filled the communication channels between the alien vessels as Admiral Drex transmitted the surrender order that would echo through galactic history. Every ship commander in his fleet received the same message simultaneously, while their tactical computers calculated the hopeless odds of fighting a human dreadnought. The numbers were clear and terrifying, but the historical context made resistance unthinkable. Captain Roth aboard the destroyer Starpiercer was the first to voice opposition to the surrender order. His vessel was a modern warship equipped with advanced weapons and defensive systems that represented the cutting edge of Council military technology. The idea of surrendering without a fight went against every military instinct he possessed. Other commanders echoed similar protests across the fleet communication network. The cruiser captains pointed out their numerical superiority, while the frigate commanders discussed coordinated attack patterns that might overwhelm the human vessel through sheer volume of fire. Several officers suggested that 2,000 years of technological advancement might have given them advantages over ancient human designs. Admiral Drex had to remind his fellow officers about the historical realities they were apparently forgetting. The Retribution-class dreadnoughts had been specifically designed to engage multiple enemies simultaneously. Their weapon systems included long-range plasma cannons that could destroy ships at distances beyond the range of most modern weapons. Their defensive screens had been tested against entire fleets and found to be virtually impenetrable. The Battle of Kepler Station remained required reading at every military academy in Council space. The human commander had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious through superior tactics and overwhelming firepower. His ship had systematically destroyed 47 enemy vessels while sustaining only minor damage. The engagement had redefined naval warfare throughout the galaxy. More importantly, the humans aboard the Retribution were not inexperienced crew members but survivors of humanity's final war. They had endured the complete extinction of their civilization and emerged from quantum stasis ready to fight for their lives. These were not theoretical opponents from history books but living, breathing warriors who had already faced the end of the world. The human dreadnought began active sensor sweeps of the alien fleet while its weapon systems achieved full readiness. Commander Kane appeared on communication channels looking calm and professional despite being outnumbered 12-1. His demeanor suggested complete confidence in his ship's abilities and his crew's training. Kane accepted the alien surrender with the courtesy of a professional military officer, but made it clear that his vessel remained ready for combat. The Retribution maintained full power to all systems while positioning itself to engage multiple targets if necessary. The human commander was taking no chances with alien intentions, Regardless of their surrender transmissions, Lieutenant Blake worked frantically to establish proper communication protocols between the human ship and the alien fleet. The translation matrices were struggling with languages that had evolved considerably since human extinction. Mathematical concepts and universal constants provided the foundation for basic understanding, but complex ideas required careful negotiation. Admiral Drex found himself in the unprecedented position of conducting first contact with a species that his civilization remembered primarily through legends of warfare and destruction. Every protocol in the Council handbook assumed that first contact would be with previously unknown species rather than the survivors of an extinct empire. The human commander seemed equally confused by the situation he found himself facing. His species had been the dominant military power in the galaxy when they entered quantum stasis. Now they were surrounded by aliens flying ships built with technology derived from human innovations. The galaxy had moved on without humanity while they were locked away in temporal suspension. Kane requested information about the current state of galactic civilization while keeping his weapons trained on the alien vessels. His tactical officer maintained targeting solutions for all 12 ships, while his engineering team kept the reactor at full power. The humans were taking no chances despite the alien surrender. The communication channel crackled with tension, as both sides tried to establish trust without lowering their guard. Admiral Drex explained that the Galactic Council had been formed centuries after human extinction to prevent the kind of warfare that had characterized the age of human expansion. The alliance represented cooperation between species rather than conquest and domination. Commander Kane listened to the alien explanation while reviewing sensor data about the fleet surrounding his ship. The vessels represented multiple species working together in apparent harmony. Their formation suggested mutual support rather than the competitive positioning typical of military alliances based on fear rather than trust. The human commander made it clear that his people had no intention of resuming the warfare that had characterized their species in the past. The Retribution was the last fragment of human civilization, and its crew understood that they were alone in a galaxy that had moved beyond the conflicts that had defined their era. Admiral Drex felt cautious optimism as the immediate crisis began to resolve into something resembling diplomatic contact. The legendary human dreadnought remained a deadly threat, but its commander seemed willing to talk rather than fight. Perhaps the survivors of humanity's extinction could find a place in the new galactic order. The alien fleet maintained defensive positions, while the human ship powered down non-essential systems. Both sides kept their weapons ready, but avoided any actions that might be interpreted as aggressive. The delicate process of first contact between the living and the dead had begun, with neither side certain of what the future might hold. Communication channels remained open between all vessels as representatives from both sides began the careful work of building trust between former enemies. The Retribution represented the ghost of an empire that had once terrified the galaxy, while the Council fleet embodied the civilization that had grown from humanity's ashes. 3 days passed before representatives from across the galaxy arrived at the coordinates, where humanity's final warship waited in space. The diplomatic convoy included ambassadors from every major species in the Galactic Council, along with historians and military analysts who specialized in studying the age of human expansion. Never before had so many different civilizations worked together to address a single crisis. Ambassador Thane of the Crystalline Consortium was the first to board the human vessel, accompanied by Admiral Drex and a carefully selected delegation of council representatives. The interior of the Retribution was exactly what they had expected based on historical records. The corridors were functional rather than decorative, with every surface designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Commander Kane met them in the main conference room, which had been hastily prepared for the unprecedented meeting. The human officer appeared calm and professional despite the enormous pressure of representing his entire species in negotiations that would determine their future. Behind him stood Chief Engineer Riley and Lieutenant Blake, who had been selected to assist with technical and communication issues. The conference room itself told the story of human military philosophy. The furniture was sturdy and practical, while the walls displayed tactical information and ship schematics rather than artwork or decorative elements. Everything about the space suggested a civilization that had prioritized warfare over cultural development during their brief time. Among the stars, Ambassador Thane began the proceedings with a formal apology for the immediate surrender response of the Council fleet. The reaction had been based on historical protocols rather than current diplomatic standards, but it had been necessary to prevent what might have been a catastrophic misunderstanding. The reputation of human military capabilities had survived, their extinction intact. Kane listened carefully as the alien diplomat explained the current state of galactic civilization. The Galactic Council had been formed 500 years after humanity's extinction with the specific goal of preventing the kind of warfare that had characterized the age of human expansion. Member species cooperated on trade and defense while maintaining their individual sovereignty. General Crix of the Draconian Military Academy provided historical context about humanity's impact on galactic military doctrine. Human tactics were still studied by every officer in Council service, while human weapon designs had influenced ship construction throughout known space. The phrase human doctrine had become synonymous with overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The alien representatives seemed genuinely interested in learning about human culture beyond their military achievements. They had detailed records of human battles and weapon specifications, but very little information about human art, literature, or philosophy. The historical archives focused almost exclusively on humanity's capacity for warfare. Kane realized that his species was remembered primarily as destroyers rather than creators. The galaxy knew about human military victories but had forgotten about human poetry, music, and scientific discoveries. 2,000 years of legend had reduced humanity to a collection of tactical manuals and weapon schematics. Ambassador Thane presented the Council's formal proposal for humanity's future. The 300 survivors aboard the Retribution would be offered full membership in the Galactic Council with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. Their knowledge and experience would be invaluable in maintaining peace between member species. The proposal included provisions for human settlement on any of dozens of worlds that had been prepared for refugee populations. The Council maintained several planets specifically for species displaced by warfare or natural disasters. Humanity could rebuild their civilization under Council protection while contributing to the greater galactic community. Kane asked about Earth and learned that their homeworld remained quarantined due to radiation from the final human civil war. The planet was maintained as a memorial to human civilization, but it would not be habitable for several more centuries. The Council had prevented other species from claiming the system out of respect for humanity's legacy. The human colonies established during their expansion period had been abandoned or destroyed during the Civil War. Supply lines had collapsed when the military focused all resources on the internal conflict. Archaeological teams had found ruins but no survivors on any of the former human worlds. Chief Engineer Riley asked about human technology and discovered that many innovations had been preserved and improved by Council scientists. Faster-than-light travel, defensive shielding, and energy weapons all showed clear human influence in their design. The galaxy had built upon humanity's scientific achievements while trying to avoid their military mistakes. Kane felt the weight of being humanity's sole representative in negotiations that would determine his species' future. 300 people were all that remained of billions who had once lived throughout the galaxy. The decisions made in this conference room would echo through whatever remained of human history. The alien delegates seemed genuinely committed to helping humanity find a place in the new galactic order. They spoke of cooperation rather than conquest and offered assistance rather than demanding tribute. The galaxy had apparently learned from the mistakes that had led to humanity's extinction. Lieutenant Blake reported that 17 different species had requested cultural exchange programs with the human survivors. They wanted to learn about human art, music, and literature rather than military tactics. The galaxy was curious about humanity's non-military achievements after centuries of knowing them only as warriors. Kane made his decision after consulting with his senior staff and crew representatives. The Retribution would accept council membership and work to rebuild human civilization in cooperation with their former enemies. They had been warriors for too long, and perhaps it was time to try being something else. The conference concluded with formal documents establishing humanity as the newest member of the Galactic Council. The Retribution would serve as humanity's embassy while its crew worked to establish new colonies and preserve their species' culture. The last human warship had found a new mission that involved creation rather than destruction. Communication channels between the human ship and the alien fleet buzzed with activity as cultural exchange programs began immediately. The survivors of humanity's extinction were no longer alone among the stars, but part of a greater community that valued cooperation over conquest.